Hello and welcome to the start of a brand new trip. In this video series, we will be exploring Lake Huron. This will be the longest trip I've ever taken, both in terms of distance and time. We will be covering about 1,800 miles over the course of 2 months. In this video, we will be covering the first several days of the trip. We are currently leaving Port Washington, Wisconsin, which is north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin on Lake Michigan. So the first 230 miles of this trip will see us crossing Lake Michigan in a direct shot to head up to the Straits of Mackinac, which is where Lake Huron begins for us. Once we're on Huron, we will also be taking a side trip to go observe the 100th anniversary of the Port Huron to Mackinaw Island sailboat race. However, before we can head out onto Lake Michigan, we need to make a turn and head over to the fuel dock. For those of you who have watched my last series where we went to the Apostle Islands and back, I'm certain you have noticed a few changes. One of which is that the camera can now move, hopefully making for more interesting shots. And secondly, and probably the most obvious one, is that this is no longer a Ranger Tug. Later on in this video, we'll go over some more in-depth details of this boat. However, for those of you who want something right now, it is called a Lifeproof Boat made out in Bremerton, Washington, near Seattle. It is an all-aluminum construction with a foam flotation collar in the blue. It is built with an eye for safety and quality, and it really shows in its performance. And I'll also mention, since we're pulling up at the fuel dock, that it takes 400 gallons of gasoline. It's about noon when we leave the fuel dock. I had originally intended for this to be an early morning, hoping to leave about 9 a.m. or so. But I had the boat delivered to Wisconsin about 2 days prior, and I had a very short amount of time to set up and provision the boat for a 2-week trip. At least at the time I thought it would be a 2-week trip. As you'll see later on, it snowballed into something much more grand. Fortunately, I still had enough time to get up and watch the Huron to Mackinaw Island boat race, which I had a few family members participating in, and I wanted to spend some time with them while they were up there. Port Washington usually has some activity going on, mostly fishing boats. However, we do see cruisers, and later in the season, great loopers come and stop by. It's been about 2 years since our last video where we went by this lighthouse. It has gotten a bit dingier since then. Fortunately, the city received a grant to repaint the lighthouse finally, which is apparently going to cost a few $1,000,000 because it has lead paint that they cannot allow to get into the water. The lighthouse also has to remain functional while they repaint it, so the light has to be visible and the foghorn has to be operational. Hopefully with the camera I'm using and the new position of the camera, you'll be able to get a better perspective on how big the waves are. In the last series, it became a little bit of a problem. Before we get underway, we got to take a second to stow the fenders and dock lines so nothing flies off when we're underway. It also helps give the illusion that I know what I'm doing sometimes. Another really fun aspect of this camera is it can record its own stats. Now might be a good time to mention that this boat has twin 600 horsepower V12 Mercury outboards, which deliver more than enough power for this boat. Right now we're at cruising speed. We'll test out the top speed a little later on. We have some beautiful conditions to start our trip with as we look back at our rapidly shrinking home port. We won't be back this way for quite a long time. When the weather's nice while crossing the lake, I always love pausing about halfway through, which is 25 to 30 miles from the nearest shoreline, and just enjoy the day for a bit. Sometime in the future, I'll probably do a dedicated video to a tour of this boat, but for now, this will give you a general idea of the layout. The interior is laid out very comfortably. Everything's really well built. Nothing rattles or moves around as you're going fast and hitting waves. Speaking of waves, both the helm seat and the passenger seat are shock seats. So even when you're in some pretty heavy weather, it can be a little bit of fun when the seat starts moving up and down. When you're out on a boat for hours and decent chop, it can get really fatiguing on a normal boat. However, with these shock seats, it just takes that all away, which is such a game changer. As we're nearing the Michigan shoreline, we're seeing the waves pick up a little bit. The forecast doesn't call for anything scary out in the day, but it may pick up a little more than this. When you get a new boat, it's really important to understand how it behaves in different conditions. So since it is getting a little rough and I haven't really had it out before, I felt it was a good, safe opportunity to start bumping up the speed a little bit and seeing how it handles. So I tried to approach it cautiously, bumping up the throttle a little bit, waiting, making sure everything was handling correctly before I'd increase speed again. It may start to look like it's getting a little crazy, but I had my kill cord on and I felt very secure in how the boat was performing at this point. So I started bringing the throttle up to full. The boat was handling this incredibly well at this speed. However, for me, it was starting to feel a little unnatural going this fast in these conditions. More importantly than knowing how a boat behaves at speed is knowing how it behaves when you bring it to a stop. I ended up bringing the boat down to about 50 before I brought the throttle all the way to neutral. I was very happy to learn that it does not throw me off the seat at all, and it feels like a very controlled slow down and stop. There is also not a lot of wash over the swim platform, which was nice to learn. Since the start of this video, we've covered about 145 miles. We are now across Lake Michigan. As we're seeing the shoreline, we are seeing Sleeping Bear Dunes to the front. And off to the left, that little mound of sand is South Manitou Island. Originally, when we set out, I had hoped to go all the way up to Mackinaw City in one go. However, with our late start and the conditions getting a little rough on the Michigan shoreline, I decided to take a backup plan and go anchor at South Manitou for the night. It's one of my favorite anchorages anyway, so it was no big deal. This boat does have a FLIR camera on it. This model is visual only, so no thermal. It is stabilized, however the stabilization is broken, so anytime there were waves it ended up wandering and looking up towards the sky, which is why it's at a weird angle right here. At the end of the trip I did take it off and send it into warranty and have since gotten it back, however for the trip it was just unusable. The lighthouse on the island has a pretty classic look to it. It was built in 1871. It is 104 foot tall, and when it was new, the light could be seen for over 17 miles. It is also a very easy and short dinghy ride away from the anchorage. For reference, here's a map of what we've done today. We have started just north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We have headed across the lake and are currently anchoring in South Manitou Island. From here, we have 90 more miles to go till we reach Lake Huron and Mackinaw City, which is our destination. This is the first time I anchored this boat. I had moored it a few times in the past, so to be on the safe side, I went downwind of everybody and gave myself plenty of space to set the anchor and make sure it wouldn't drag. The anchor ended up holding incredibly well all night and didn't budge once. I did have an anchor alarm set all night just because I was a little nervous that the wind was blowing me towards the beach, and that is not where I wanted to end up. We are now on day 2 of the trip. Conditions on the lake are supposed to calm down a bit in the late morning, early afternoon, so we are in no rush to get out of the anchorage, and it is the perfect time to send up the drone and go over the boat a little bit. So this is a Lifeproof Boat 35 full cabin. Lifeproof Boats is based out of Bremerton, Washington, which is just across from Seattle, Washington. It has a length overall of 37 feet with the engines trimmed down and about 39 with them trimmed up like you see here in the video. It is capable of doing, I think I personally got it up to 65 in saltwater. However, on the Great Lakes, I've only seen, I think, 62. That's because freshwater is a little less buoyant and a slightly higher altitude. It has an 11-foot beam made completely of aluminum, about 16,000 pounds. The fuel tank is 400 gallons. Freshwater tank is 40 gallons. And the blackwater tank, which is where your toilet goes to, is 20 gallons. Something everybody at marinas asks me about is the blue collar around the boat. Lots of people think that it is an inflatable boat. However, that collar is solid foam, so if it's ever punctured, it loses no flotation. The collar also acts as a great stabilizer both at the dock and when underway, keeping the boat flat. The company refers to it as the life jacket for the boat, and it makes the boat virtually unsinkable. I think they say that because if you call something unsinkable, you are just tempting fate. This boat has twin 600 Mercury outboards. They are absolutely fantastic engines. It's a lot of horsepower, but more importantly, they have really great benefits to them. One is that service is only needed once every 200 hours and the boat doesn't have to come out of the water. Usually on outboards, like on my Ranger Tug, it needs 100-hour service on it and usually has to come out of the water for that. The other huge benefit to the engines is just how quiet they are. When you're going 40 to 60 miles an hour, I've had passengers sit on the back benches having a normal conversation. When you're back there going at speed, some of the loudest noise is actually the water going over the hull and the flag flapping versus the engines themselves, which make for a very pleasant ride, especially if you're out for hours and hours. Also, since the only part of the engine that turns is the silver lower units you see there, the entire back deck can have more space since the engines don't need the space to swivel back and forth. And since there's more space on the back deck, the dinghy and the dinghy lift could be fit onto the boat itself. The dinghy gets off because a little davit crane unfolds. You lift the whole thing up, swivel over, and just drop it down. The whole process takes maybe 3 minutes to launch the dinghy. The boat also has 3 140-watt solar panels mounted to the top along with Starlink. For anchoring, the boat is equipped with an ultra anchor underneath the bow, which is a really cool, more modern design, which really holds in all sorts of conditions and doesn't usually bring up a bundle of weeds like my old Delta anchor did. It is also connected to what's known as a drum windlass, which is just one big spool of the anchor chain and rode instead of notching it in one by one where you have to kind of guide it into a locker and make sure everything lays correctly. It is also so strong that I don't have to worry about tying off the anchor rode to take stress off the windlass. I can just set it and forget it. That's as much as we're going to be going over the boat today. At some point it will get its own video, but for now, let's get back to the trip. From the south of where we're anchored, right along the sandy beach, is the only dock on the island. This dock is a passenger ferry only and brings day tourists and campers to the island. I believe the ferry only arrives once or twice a day, so it's one you definitely don't want to miss. The anchorage has a lot of space. The reason you see everybody anchoring hugging the shoreline is that further out it gets really deep really fast. If you have a dinghy at this anchorage, I'd highly recommend going to shore and walking the beach for a while. The beach is very nice and very big. However, it's not fine sand. It's more some sand with a lot of small pebbles in it. So it's not the most comfortable thing to walk on, but it's nice to hang out on. Now that it's late morning and hopefully the lake has calmed down a bit, it is time to get moving again to Mackinaw City. As we passed North Manitou Island, conditions seemed a little better than the day before. Unfortunately, we're in the shadow of the island right now, so that didn't last long. Once we were back out into open water, conditions just went right back to where they were the day before. So forecast was a little off, but nothing concerning. I really enjoy seeing ships out on the water, and today I definitely got my fill. We are going to see a bunch of them as we get closer to Mackinaw City. This area usually has a lot of recreational boaters like myself out, but today I only saw a handful. This camera doesn't do great when we do zoom shots, but if you see the smudge off to the left, that is Gray's Reef Lighthouse, and on the right you see a catamaran that is not having a very fun day. My favorite landmark to go by when going up to Mackinac is the abandoned lighthouse. This light was built in 1850. It stands 63 feet tall, and it was abandoned in 1912. The foundation of the lighthouse has been crumbling and been in very bad shape for many years now, so the entire thing is expected to collapse to the lake at some point. I was hoping to do a full 360 of the lighthouse, but as you can see, my plans have changed pretty quick here. It suddenly got very shallow very fast, and I did not want to run aground on the first day. We can save that for later. This is the Mackinaw Bridge. It is one of the longest suspension bridges in the United States. And once we're underneath it, we will be on Lake Huron for the rest of the trip. On one side of the bridge is Mackinaw City. That is our destination for today. At this point, we are keeping a close watch out for any ferries coming in and out of the city, going over to Mackinaw Island. It is a very popular tourist destination, and there are lots of ferries all the time. Since it is such a busy place, I stopped a mile out or so from the marina entrance, radioed the marina, let them know I was coming. They were sending somebody out to help me dock. And then I got my fenders and lines ready. Normally I do it a bit closer to the marina, but I just didn't want to get in anybody's way. The city has two marinas. We are going to the city marina. Next door is the Straits State Harbor. Both are very large and within walking distance of each other and all the ferries to get to the island. Directly ahead, you see two blue ferries at one of the ferry docks. All day, every day, you will see ferries go from the early morning to late at night. I did stay at this marina. I was concerned about it bothering me, but they are pretty quiet and respectful when going in and out of the harbor here. The only thing you really hear is the PA announcements with all the safety briefing for the passengers. And when I was inside my cabin, I barely even heard those, so it was a pretty peaceful stay here. When you stay on Mackinaw Island itself, you will get a lot of ferry wake at those docks, but we'll come to that a little later on in this trip when we stay there. This video has covered the first 2 days and 250 miles of our trip, as we made a lot of distance getting off of Lake Michigan and onto Lake Huron. From here on out, the days will be a little shorter and less distance traveled, but a lot more to see as we explore all the little nooks and crannies of Lake Huron. In the next video, we will be taking a day trip to head out onto Lake Huron to watch the Port Huron to Mackinac Island sailboat race. Thank you for watching to the end. If you like this sort of video and want to see more, please subscribe. Until then, I will see you next time.